Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Pearls of Wisdom podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Michael Moriarty. He is the Drapers Professor of French at the University of Cambridge, as well as a Fellow of the British Academy. He is here today to discuss his book, Pascal, Reasoning and Belief. Professor Moriarty, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Anthony.
It's my pleasure. And so why don't you first tell us more about yourself and your background and your interest in this subject?
Yes, well, I decided, I think when I was still at high school, as you would say, that I wanted to study French at university. But I was always interested, as well as being interested in French poetry, I was interested in French thinkers, especially Descartes and Pascal, very different as they are. And when I studied university, I studied at French university. A lot of what I studied was literature, but I kept coming back to Pascal, partly in an odd kind of way. That I was very interested when I was writing my PhD in Althusser's version of Marxism. And Althusser is heavily influenced by Pascal. In fact, his theory of ideology he says himself, sort of taken from Pascal. So for many years, I was sort of interested in Pascal and Bourdieu. Pierre Bourdieu is also interested in Pascal. So I was interested in Pascal as a sort of social thinker, and he is a very rigorous and fascinating social thinker. And I wasn't so interested in the purely religious aspect of his work, but having at a certain point moved back to working more on the religious thought of the 17th century and the philosophical thought of the 17th century. I found myself becoming fascinated by that again, and in a way, sort of completing as something I had wanted to do since I was quite young, really, which was to go into Pascal's apologetics. So it's sort of rather circular kind of route back to Pascal.
That's excellent. Thank you very much for that. And so now, can you tell us a bit more about why you think Pascal's religious thought merits our attention and study?
Yeah, I think because of its extreme originality, because it's not bound up with certain kinds of philosophical argument that must once have seemed incredibly powerful evidence of religion, but which now don't look the same. I mean, that's to say, I know there are. If you take the classic argument from design, that you see order and purpose in nature,
right,
and this must reflect a mind in nature, then obviously it's more difficult to maintain that argument in the light of the theory of natural selection.
Right.
But Pascal never advanced it, and that argument is, of course, incredibly powerful and influential. But Pascal doesn't ever advance it, and his approach to questions of belief is not a metaphysical approach. It doesn't involve one. It involves one thinking about the experience of human beings in the human condition, and so in that way, it has a very strong connection with experience. And I think that's a powerful aspect of it as well. And of course, it might be that the human condition will change. How much can the human condition change? Or, for instance, if the world, if the developments of artificial intelligence, radically change our position on the planet, for instance, then we might not be talking about the human condition the same sort of way. But I think that the human condition Pascal is talking about is, not greatly dissimilar to our own.
Right. So Pascal has often been described as, the first modern Christian, and one reason for that is because his religious apologetics differ significantly from the apologetics, as you were just talking about, of his predecessors, and including medieval scholasticism. So I guess you are right to make that distinction. but would you agree that Pascal is the first modern Christian, or do you think that would be a bit of a misnomer?
Well, I mean, I think as long as one admits that, you could make the same argument for other people, like Luther or someone. Right. I think perhaps he's the first major thinker to think about the relationship between religion and the new science in such a radical way. I mean, of course, Descartes is an equally influential and important promoter of the new science, but his metaphysics allows him, affords a certain kind of continuity with the scholastic approach. So he doesn't think, there are some very interesting passages in Descartes about whether the universe is boundless or not, and whether there are creatures on other planets, what would God's purpose for them be, and so on. So, but he doesn't seem to think that the progress of the new science might be any impediment to Christian belief, and Pascal, I think, is aware of the way that people are beginning to experience the universe in a very different kind of way, which is less. People are less at home in the universe, and belief seems more precarious. Yeah, so I think that you could make quite a good case for that view.
Yes. And I'm reminded of the famous passage in the Pensées where Pascal talks about how these infinite spaces frighten me. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That does.
And of course, people argue whether that means me, Pascal, or whether this is Pascal speaking in the voice of a non-believer, for whom there's nothing but infinite space. Right. But I don't think one can decide it one way or t'other.
Right.
But the point is the same, that he's aware. I mean, he's aware of a kind of sensibility that of people who can look at the universe and not see order and beauty and obvious signs of the divine wisdom, and who are just not impressed if you say, well, look at the order of the planets, and the regular motions of the heavens.
Right. So can you tell us more about why Pascal rejected the approach of his predecessors? Like, why did he reject natural theology? Why did he not like what he calls the metaphysical proofs for God's existence?
Yeah, I think he has two main lines of thought. One there's a sort of principled rejection, which is only hinted at in the sort of fragment that contains the wager. He says that God is so incommensurate with us that we cannot even know that he exists. We cannot pass. And there's a sense there in which he might be. This is one of the a point that Lucien Goldman made, but never quite developed. Yes, God has no relationship to him. He's infinitely incomprehensible. He has no parts or limits, and therefore, his relationship to us is incommensurable. We are thus incapable of knowing what he is, or if he exists. And there's a sense there in which he might be saying something that Kant was to give a much more extensive philosophical rationale for, that our thinking can never transcend our limited body experience. He has that line, which other people pick up with the Heideggerian word about being thrown into the world. Our soul is thrown into the body where it finds number, time, dimensions. It reasons on those things and calls that nature, necessity, and cannot believe anything else. So there's a sense in which he might be saying, as Kant was to say, that you can't use categories of thinking that by which we interpret our experience to find the ultimate conditions of our experience. But if he is saying that, he's saying it in a very kind of sketchy and inchoate sort of way. He could be, and I think his other point is that arguments for the existence of God, leave aside the argument from design, as it were, because non-believers can't see design in the universe. It just looks like an awful, blind sort of mess. Okay. What about causal arguments like those you get in Aquinas or Descartes? Well, I think he never discusses Aquinas' 5 ways, but he might have felt that the sort of Aristotelian framework, the way Aquinas talks about motion in the first way, is not the way that modern natural philosophers are thinking about motion. That's just a speculation.
Yeah.
But certainly, I mean, if you come down to say Descartes' proof of the existence of God, you've got to be first of all, you've got to be sure of the principle of causality, and then you've got to be aware. You've got to be convinced that there cannot be an infinite regress of causes. Mm-hmm. That's to say, causes hierarchically dependent on one another. Now, actually, I think there's quite a good reason for thinking that. I'm quite sympathetic to that argument in principle. But I think Pascal's point is that if you're asking someone to base their whole life on a decision, you can't expect them to think, if they're kind of thinking, hang on, why couldn't it be an infinite series of causes again? Or does everything really have to have a cause? So his argument is really that they're so complex intellectually that even if they're valid, they don't have any psychological bite. Right. Whereas he's trying to construct arguments addressed to our daily experience of desire for happiness and frustration, things that you can't quarrel with,
Right. So I guess he thought that natural theology was in some sense irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, except perhaps in that passage from the Wager fragment, he doesn't say these arguments are invalid. But he does say nobody has ever come to belief in God from those arguments. Oh, the other thing he says, of course, if they did come to belief, they would believe in a philosopher's God, right. A sort of abstract entity, not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Yeah. So they wouldn't really be Christians.
Right. And he also says
that. I mean, I think psychologically it's perfectly possible to pass from non-belief in God to belief in God, and then to thinking, well, I've got to worship this deity somehow. I mean, C.S. Lewis went through that sort of transition, sort of a general belief in God, and then a decision about which actual form of worshipping God he should espouse, and he opted for Christianity. So I'm not saying it's psychologically impossible at all, but I think that's the sort of point he's making, that you don't convert people by causal arguments or cosmological arguments.
So I think but I think it would be a misconception or to see Pascal as someone who was completely opposed to reason, because he does provide evidence for Christianity. Thought there was good evidence for Christianity, but he just did not like the God of the philosophers. He was not fond of deism, right? So he was concerned to defend Christianity. So
I think he's aware. I mean, nowadays, if someone becomes a theist, they are probably more sympathetic to religion in general. Whereas he's aware that actually belief in God, but not in any particular religion, is a sort of live option. It's a way of not being a Christian without being that terrible thing called an atheist, as it were.
Right. So I guess my next question would be then, whom is Pascal trying to convince with his Pensées? Whom is the work addressed?
He does say, I know people argue about this one, but he does, but I think this is right. He does say that someone who's got faith already doesn't need conversion. They don't need arguments to support their faith. They have a living faith in God. Okay, so when we don't have to reassure them, we don't. If they've got real faith in God, they won't have any better faith in God because you put forward. So he's aware of the fact that intelligent people might not believe in God. They might be philosophical skeptics. They might have picked up from Montaigne. They might have learned to distrust human reason without being willing to go as far as saying we'll submit to authority. So he talks about free thinkers, and he must have met some of them in the sort of aristocratic world. Who speak of themselves as having thrown off the yoke. And he says it's a bit of a cliche. They all say, I've thrown off the yoke of belief. But he is aware that there are, intelligent people who don't want to believe in God. So, and this is the other thing, that he thinks that you've got to find arguments for people who don't want to believe in God. So you've got to furnish them with sort of massive considerations, very very powerful considerations to sort of jolt them out of their complacency.
Right. Right. So it's interesting that Pascal wanted to make Christianity not only plausible, but also appealing and I guess you'd say likable, right? Because he says people not only think religion is irrational, they don't like it, right?
Yes,
so it's a problem.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They don't want there to be a God.
Right.
Yes.
Exactly. Okay. So my next question would be then, so why didn't Pascal just a two-step apologetic approach that is common to many other Christian apologists? So why can't he just argue for philosophical theism first, then make the transition to Christianity?
Yeah, I think he's. Well, I think partly he's afraid that people will just stop at the philosophical theism and say this is a superior kind of religion to any institutional religion, more philosophical kind of religion. And if they do that, they will have developed such sort of confidence in human reason, they're absolutely not going to be willing to. They'll almost be more difficult to convince than an atheist, as it were. They'll become sort of Stoics, if you like. And he thinks Stoicism's, it's got lofty moral ideals, but its moral ideals do not correspond to the facts of human nature. We're too weak and vain, as it were, ever to be. To be a Stoic, you'd have to mutilate yourself so much you wouldn't be. So I think he thinks it's understandable. And if you ask why, I think maybe also that there's. He's very much indebted to Montaigne and to the Montaigne of the Apology of Raymond Sebon, Book 2, Chapter 12, where Montaigne pours scorn on the claims of human reason. And I think Pascal probably thinks that even if the arguments of philosophical theology, typically advanced by philosophical theologians, are valid, they're always open to controversy. You can't find an argument, because someone might say, but appeal again to the infinite regress, or deny that anything outside the world is required to explain it. Just say, well, the world's existed forever, and it's just a series of, So there's, I think he feels that there are facts there, there are views there that can always be challenged, and therefore, if you want to build the house of faith on them, they're shaky foundations.
So then, to what extent do you think Pascal tolerated uncertainty in religion, or I guess we could say Christianity? Because he seems to acknowledge the fact that that God provides some evidence for him, but that evidence is less than coercive.
Yes, that's very well put. The evidence is less than coercive, and so in the end, what he says is that the evidence is not coercive. It is the prophecies, miracles, and the proofs of our religion are not of such a nature that one can say they are absolutely convincing, meaning sort of rigorously convincing, right. Not logical demonstrations. But they are convincing in such a way that you can't say it's irrational to believe them. So he's basically saying there's more evidence than not, but there's not enough evidence to overcome resistance. So people who don't want to believe won't believe. And he ties this into his theme of which you alluded, of the hiddenness of God.
Mm-hmm. Right.
God is certainly hidden in the sense that there aren't manifest signs of his presence that will convince everybody.
Right.
And Pascal thinks that God's hiddenness is actually part of God's plan, and this is this is the hardest part of Pascal, I think, to accept for many people, and I would myself find it, that it is tied, that his argument, I think, the way he constructs his argument serves a kind of a rhetorical agenda. And I'm not using the word rhetorical in a negative sense. That's to say, he thinks this kind of argument is the most persuasive. Okay, but it also registers a theological agenda, because he thinks that God wished to reveal himself to some, but not to all. And indeed, he has this very dark saying, hard saying, one understands nothing of the works of God if one does not understand that he wished to enlighten some and to blind others. And that is linked to his strict Augustinian doctrine of predestination. So that, you know, if someone's, he makes this distinction between human faith and real faith. And he says, if someone doesn't have real faith, we can only give them the kind of belief that comes from reasoning. Okay. And that may not be, you know, what some Christians call saving faith, but it may be the instrument of saving faith. It may be that God's plan to give saving faith to X is worked out through the fact that X comes to think about religion and approach it in a more or less Pascalian kind of way. But you know, not everybody will respond to those proofs. Not everyone will have those proofs available. And that's because, you know, human beings are left in some human beings are plucked from the mass of reprobation, but some are not. You know, so it's in fact most are not. I mean, in the writings on grace, he says what was in fact the general view in his time, that the elect were a minority. It's later that some Catholic theologians began to say, well, no, I mean, I think in his own time, Suarez was saying, well, probably a majority of Catholics will be saved. I mean, don't know about other people, but a majority of Catholics. And then, you know, later theologians perhaps more inclusive in general. But so in thinking that the elect are few, Pascal's not totally unrepresentative, but in his so the way he ties his apologetics to you know, the Augustinian doctrine of predestination is I think it's difficult for a modern reader, right, unless they happen themselves to hold exactly the same theological views.
Yes, definitely. And so I guess now I wonder, so Pascal was a Jansenist, and he believed that you know, faith was a product of grace and not something, or at least what we might call saving faith is a product of grace. So then that raises the question as to why would you write an apology for faith? So I mean, I guess, did he believe that he was predestined to write this apology?
Well, that's probably true, but he I don't think he would have thought necessarily that every single act of a person's life is predestined in that way, simply the general arc of their life, if you like. But I think his point would be that reason can be one of the means by which revelation accredits itself. It can't, you know, it can be. He says that faith, of which proof is often the instrument. So he's saying that by reason, people may come to faith. Now, what that means is that by reason, people may come to a place where God gives them faith. Right. But he's saying that's more natural than, obviously God could give anyone faith. You know, St. Paul, you know, he appears to St. Paul and says, "Why dost thou persecute me?" And Saul is convinced and converted. But that's not the usual modus operandi. So there is, so even if faith is a gift of God, it may be that you can help people to faith. In fact, Pascal talks of it being sort of a duty to do what one can for people who don't have faith, and one needs to be aware that it may be that they will be fuller of faith than oneself, So I think he thinks that it's no more illogical to write an apology than to teach children the catechism, as it were. Because I think what you're saying in both cases is that we don't know that by teaching them the catechism we're ensuring their salvation, but we could be pretty sure that if we didn't teach them the catechism, they wouldn't be saved,
Okay.
barring a miracle, which is
right. Okay. So I want to ask another question about Pascal's understanding of faith. So a concept that he often discusses in relation to faith is the heart. So what exactly did he mean by the heart? Like, did he mean just fuzzy feelings?
That's the absolute $64,000 question. He doesn't mean fuzzy feelings. He means very strong convictions, which are unshakable. And so he says, we have knowledge. Okay, the skeptics say you can't prove all kinds of things. And the skeptics are right to say there's lots of things we can't prove, but they're wrong to say, therefore, we know nothing. Because we know, for instance, that there is time, there is movement, there is number. We can't prove those things. We just know that they're so. And how we know them, he says, is through the heart. Okay, so we don't just have a sort of fuzzy feeling that we live in three-dimensional space. We have an incorrigible feeling, an unshakable feeling that we live in that kind of space. And although one very eminent Pascal scholar, Henri Gouillet, says, he's using the word heart here in a very particular way, don't make generalizations about other uses of heart. I think I think Pascal is inviting us, and through those kinds of unshakable knowledges, unshakable but unprovable knowledges, he's giving us an example of what it would be like to have faith. If you really had faith, God would be as real to you as the physical world that surrounds you. That's what faith is, and it's a fundamental condition of your experience. And so the other meaning of heart indeed is connected with love, and how you reconcile those meanings of heart is a very difficult thing. But the heart can mean heart is the seat of love. It's one's moral disposition. It's the seat of the will. So what I've tried to discuss here is the way in which affect, the heart, Pascal definitely uses the heart as the seat of the affections, and as equally the seat of belief or knowledge of primary principles. And what I think Pascal is suggesting is that faith, insofar as it's seated in the heart, has this kind of it's a new vision of the world, and a new which goes with affections. It's a sense of it's an attraction to something good outside oneself, just as it seems in its cognitive sense, it seems to give us a kind of knowledge of an objective reality outside ourselves. It is also the seat of our basic inclinations towards a good outside oneself, and we don't. So to that extent, he would say with St. Augustine, thou hast made us for thyself, and our heart is restless until it rests in thee. It's our basic inclination towards the good. It is. I said what I tried to suggest is that, and follow Jean Laporte's here, that the heart is the seat of desire, but it presupposes some idea of that which is desired. And therefore, all our desires presuppose a physical world structured by space, time, movement, and number. And faith is like the sense of another dimension built on top of that. And it's that which our desires for God presuppose. So it's kind of hard to, the heart gives us the basic framework of our perceptions within which we are inclined to certain goods, but it's a very difficult term to kind of untangle. I think I've done my best to, but I'm not sure.
That was good. Thank you very much. And so one of the most famous lines from the Pensées is, "The heart has its reasons, of which reason knows nothing." So, so how should we interpret passages like that and other passages where Pascal seems to be, some would say, diminishing reason? Like, he says, humiliate yourself, reason, or like humble yourself, reason. Like, what should we?
Well, I think his he goes on to say, one doesn't prove that one should be loved by listing in order the causes of one's love. You can't say to someone, love me because I am, wise, attractive, and all that sort of thing. And so he has more confidence in the demonstrative reason than one might think. He's a mathematician. And he doesn't say this explicitly, but, certainly he thinks he knows a lot of things that Montaigne didn't think he knew because he can do the math. So in certain spheres, reasons, abstract mathematical reason rules unchecked, has a legitimate sovereignty. We have also another kind of reason, which is a kind of reflexive reason, where we think about our experience, we reflect on our experience, and that too could be called reason. But I think when he says, when we reflect on our experience, we may discover some kind of lack in our experience. We may think there is something missing from the world or from our world. Okay, there's something which means we can never be fulfilled in our daily experience, and that might lead someone to a kind of longing for God, a longing for a good that would satisfy all yearnings and fill any gap. Yeah. And of course, the objection might be made that desire is not something that can be handled completely logically using the mathematical reason. Our perceptions of in the chapter on proofs of Jesus Christ, he's actually most concerned with the portrayal of Christ as he appears in Scripture. What kind of person was Christ? And I think he's hoping, as it were, by that stage, that the reader has enough sympathy with Christianity to feel that the person portrayed in the scriptures is supremely lovable. But if someone were to say, well, I don't see what's lovable about these supposed miracles, or it doesn't seem that lovable to me, or, it would have been better if he'd educated the Pharisees instead of, railing at them. I mean, you can think all kinds of rationalist objections, which only an intelligent person could make, against which might lead someone, which might, in the objector's eyes, validate a lack of interest in the person of Christ and the figure of Christ. Does that make sense? So that if when we read the scriptures we find Christ a supremely appealing figure, that's perfectly legitimate, because love doesn't need the kind of reasons that can be proved. You can't say, I mean, Pascal doesn't think you can say to an objector, oh, well, you must love Christ because he fed the 5,000, or because he raised Lazarus from the dead, because the objector could always find reasons for saying, well, why didn't he feed the 10,000? What about the starving millions, currently in the world? Why doesn't he raise other people from the dead? So the imaginative and affective appeal of Christ is not something that can be demonstrated rationally in the way that you can. Pascal would certainly believe you can demonstrate a mathematical truth to anyone who's capable of understanding the maths. Right. So you can't demonstrate an affective truth, and yet I think Pascal would say it's not wrong to be attracted to the figure of Christ as portrayed in the Gospels. Simply, it's not, even if you can't, as it were, prove that he's an appealing figure to someone who doesn't find him such. Does that make sense? So I think that's how I would gloss the bit about the reasons of the heart.
Okay.
It's true that I know that people often, when they pick on that sentence, they think, he's just saying faith is a fuzzy kind of thing. And when I, as an atheist, argue against your faith, and you say there are reasons of the heart, that's just a cop-out because you can't answer my rational atheistic reasons. And I don't think Pascal's. I think when Pascal talks about faith, he doesn't mean, I got a sort of feeling that maybe there's some higher power bigger than us. It's not like that at all. I mean, if faith for him would be a sort of burning certainty of God, which, out of which one couldn't be argued, but out of which, one wouldn't feel like being argued, as it were.
Oh, and I should also ask you, I know that you have a meeting to attend after this. So are you fine going until 3:50?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Right. So now I would like to ask you about the wager. So could you first tell us what is Pascal's wager, and second, is it even correct to speak of Pascal's wager as if there were only a single wager, or does he offer several wagers?
Yes, he does formulate the thing in several different stages. That's right. I think the basic presupposition is that if we don't trust metaphysics, we can't provide a convincing proof of the existence of God. We can't provide a convincing proof of the non-existence of God. So we have to, and yet it makes a difference to the way we live our lives, whether we believe in God or not, or whether there's a God or not. Not only whether there's a God or not, but whether we believe that there's a God or not.
Right.
So there's a sort of assumption there, of course, that many people question. People would say, well, if God wants me to believe in him, he should provide more evidence. And if I honestly can't accept such evidence as there is, and he is a good God, he would forgive me for my incredulity. And so I think Pascal never discusses that objection, but it's not by any means an irrelevant one. Someone has to think, why doesn't he discuss that objection?
Right.
So he's assuming, therefore, that it makes a difference to one's life whether there is a God. If there's no God, there's no afterlife, presumably, and also that believing, whether one believes in him, will affect one's status in the afterlife. So that's one key assumption. And then his argument is simply that God, being an infinite good, is preferable to any finite good, and therefore it's more rational to wager in favor of the infinite good, and to live your life as if this infinite good exists, than to live your life on the basis that it doesn't exist. Now, of course, again, you could question that view if you thought that it's possible to have a perfectly satisfying human life and you don't want a infinite happiness, whatever that means.
Right.
Because he does sort of he does at some point talk in a language of sort of stacking up lives. If you one illustrative thing is, would it be rational to wager one life to win two? And then would it be rational? I think I myself would incline to think there's only one wager, which is as he describes it, but it does make presuppositions that aren't argued for in the fragment of the wager itself. So, and the other presupposition, which you obviously thinking of, is, well, Diderot was to say, well, an imam could use this argument to say, well, believe in Allah, now it's not true that every religion promises infinite happiness, but there are a few that do. You couldn't say believe in Zeus and you'll have eternal life. Because the Greeks believed in Zeus, they didn't think they'd have blissful eternal life unless they were great heroes or something. So it's not true that any religion could make this claim, but it is true that there are other religions that could make the claim. My own, leaving aside the sort of invented gods that some philosophers have used to demonstrate the inadequacy of the wager, leaving them aside because I don't think they're actually very illuminating. You could certainly imagine, for instance, you could imagine a benign deity that, you could imagine that God decides to save everyone. Universalism is always been a minority view, but it has all, Origin was, as we believe, a universalist. So, and therefore I think that it's an argument that Pascal may have thought was absolutely decisive in its own terms.
Right.
But I think myself, it's only decisive, or it only has any value, if the person approaching it already has certain positions established. If they're saying, it's Christianity or nothing for me, I've thought about other religions, it's not going to be any other religion, so it's Christianity or nothing, then the many God, if they feel they have good reasons or reasons that convince them why it's Christianity or nothing, then one doesn't have to worry about whether an imam could use the argument, because the imam's argument wouldn't persuade them, as it were. So my feeling about, and equally, that would deal with the question about whether, surely God won't punish me for not believing if he hasn't given me lots of evidence. If Christianity is explaining, well, God hasn't given lots of evidence because there are profound reasons why that's so, then some of these objections fall away. So I think that by itself as an isolated piece of argument, I mean, I think it's a very, very interesting one. But I can see why many people find it flawed, and I think it such value as it has, I think, depends on someone already being in a certain position whereby they have decided that if they're going to believe in anything, it's going to be Christianity, and that Christianity is therefore the wisest option for them to take.
Right, but wouldn't you say that Pascal tries to bring his reader to such a position through the rest of his Pensées? Like he, for example,
I think so. On the other hand, I certainly wouldn't claim. I mean, I think that the wager, if it works at all, could work as the sort of capstone of a set of other arguments based on the scriptures. Based on human nature, religious history, the life of Christ, and some of the things that, but I can't say so. And I think that some people think that Pascal, so eminent a theologian as Pascal expert as Philippe Sellier, thinks that the wager comes quite early in the process, that you're trying to, you first of all tell someone you're mad not to investigate the claims of Christianity, and then you say, but you'll be mad not to wager on Christianity, and then you bring in all these proofs. Now, Sellier bases his arguments on sound textual considerations, and if he's right, but if he's right about that, if that's how Pascal meant to do it, then I think his argument, the wager per se, is open to all kinds of objections of the sort that I've hinted at, as it were. But I think, so I'm certainly not saying that he intended to use it as a kind of final crowning sort of argument, but I think it sort of works better there than sort of anywhere else, if it works at all.
I mean, he does cite scripture and the rest to his doubting interlocutor. So his interlocutor asks him, well, what if I want to hedge my bets, I want more evidence before I make this wager. Then he says, well, you should look at scripture and the rest.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess. Right. So then do you think it would make more sense if the wager comes at the end of the work?
Well, I think so. I think so. But from a sort of rhetorical point of view, or from terms of persuasion, I think it does. From an argumentative point of view, what I do concede is that you can't establish that from a philological point of view. There are people who study the paper on which different fragments are written to try and say this is 1656, 1567, and if Sellier's view of Pascal's apology is if it works in his terms, it's not the same as the ones I've tried to set out.
So I guess this is going to be my final question, but so why does Pascal use the metaphor, or is it even a metaphor, of wagering? And what does he mean by wagering? And he seems to see it as an ongoing process, because he says there are people who now wager all they have and who are now religious believers. So
that's right. Well, I think because he I suppose the point about a wager is that it involves a sacrifice, or it involves a temporary sacrifice. If I'm betting on a horse race on Saturday, I've got to put my $10 down now, and I may never get them back. So he's trying to show the fact that whatever choices we make involve sacrifice in view of a return, and so he's trying to say that you can't sort of say, well, I will fulfill my every earthly instinct and enjoy that, but go to heaven in the end, because God's a nice guy, as it were. You think, well, the life of supreme sensual indulgence is also a sacrifice, in that you give up what benefits there might have been in not. So I think it's that idea of sacrifice that makes the wager, sacrifice and uncertainty, that make the wager a sort of convincing metaphor.
All right. Okay. Well, So it's almost 10:50 now. I know that you have to go. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for this interview. I really enjoyed it. And is there anything else you'd like to say before we continue?
No, I think not. I mean, thank you very much for inviting me. I hope I've managed to do justice to Pascal, because I think he's a very remarkable thinker. And thank you, Annie, for giving me the chance to talk about him.
My pleasure. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.